you didn't just go through a broken past. Parts of it was built in how you think, love, and react. And if you don't deal with that, you'll keep living from it. Um, Healing isn't just about what happened to you, it's about what it created in you. And a lot of us are still operating from versions of ourselves that are built in survival, right? Um, so I have different points for this, but the first point is survival created a false version of you, right? You learn how to cope, right? But now, not how to be whole, right? So now you show up guarded, reactive, or distant, and then you call it your personality. Um, so I relate to it in a sense like this, right? Like I went through physical abuse, right? Um, when I was young, as a kid, and my abuser was a family member. So, and what this looked like was me being beaten all the time for any reason at all, and there was no real reason half of the time. It was just whenever the person felt like it, and it was a family member, and a lot of it was like very secret, and I was always threatened with if you say anything, you're gonna get worse type. So that created like a fear culture. It created in me where it's like not doing what people want can have consequences, and it also created this mindset, right, with the beatings. It's like I started, the longer it went on, the more my personality started to shape around being someone who would be more aware of someone else's feelings in order to protect my feelings. So it's like my feelings started to become based around whatever theirs was. And it created this dynamic where I was constantly in survival mode. And my way of surviving was to be as small as possible so they don't notice me. But when they did, I would have to be this person that would be so aware of your feelings. So when it was coming, I can build and prepare my mindset for when the beatings came, so I can check out and not have to endure so much, or at least feel like I'm enduring so much. And so that was the mindset it created. And as I grew older, I became very empathetic, and I was empathetic with no boundaries. And I think some of us know exactly what that is. And this, like my shutting down kind of looked like me retreating. Suddenly, I knew I couldn't trust nobody, so I would shut down, retreat, deal with myself. And then, but there was also this overgiving. And it took me a long time to realize this, that a lot of my friendships and relationships were built around me giving so much to the point that I would burn myself out. And then when I look back, and I did a lot of reflecting and meditating this morning on it, where it's like, I look back and a lot of my relationships were conditional on me giving more in the relationship in order for it to keep going. And if I didn't do anything, it would just kind of fall flat. And then the more I healed, the more I started to realize like I can't normalize this anymore. I can't keep allowing myself to be someone that normalizes relationships where I'm getting breadcrumbs and then I'm celebrating those breadcrumbs and then I'm overwhelming them with all this love because the little I created into this big thing because I was so used to getting nothing. And it took a lot of healing for me to recognize that pattern because all throughout, it wasn't just men I was dating, it was all my friendships. From high school, I had friends where, like, I thought we were mad cool. And until I stopped giving so much into the relationship, that person turned quickly into an enemy. And I got to a point where it's like, I'm not going to try and figure her out. I'm just going to let it go. It's not worth it. But again, that wasn't real. That wasn't the real me, right? That was survival. The survival me was the person who had to keep trying, had to keep working in these relationships, taking breadcrumbs and not creating a standard for myself, right? Like I give a lot and I love really hard and big in relationships, but I wasn't willing to like create that as a standard. I just was like, well, whatever you can give, I'll take. And even if it's a little bit. And then I realized it started off with them giving something, and then over time it would just turn into absolutely nothing. I had friendships where they claim we're friends, but I hit you up, I never get a call back, and then I don't hear from you for like 2, 3 months. And that was normal. And it took me a long time to realize that I had to get myself together, and like that's what you call breadcrumbs. Yeah. But point two, you're protecting yourself from things that aren't happening anymore, right? Um, your mind is still trying to keep you safe, right? Understandably so. But from a past that's no longer present, right? So I had this experience. I had this ex, and it was my first ex, really. But it was like this experience where, like, at that point, I had disassociated my abuse, like, for years at this point. So it was to a point that I didn't even remember it happened. Um, but then I had this experience with him where he knew something was wrong, and I didn't even know something was wrong, right? But he wanted to talk about something. I forgot what it was, but it had something to do with feelings. And then I was just like, nope. And I was ready to go. And then he refused to let me go. And immediately my mind started saying, you're in danger, run, run, run. And then I'm just like, oh God. And then I start like, and I was like, and I know this feeling. I was like, this feeling tends to make me black out. And then I used to have these when I was younger, before I healed. Um, all the disassociating because I wasn't willing to deal with the past, it would cause me to just literally black out. And then I would be in full blown surviving from my abuser moment. And the person who triggered me is the abuser that I have to protect myself from. And it hasn't happened in years because I've been on my healing journey and I've been intentional about it. And I learned how to address how I'm feeling in that moment and give myself permission to deal with me and not let people make me feel certain ways. Anyways, but the ex was like well intended where he was trying to get me to talk about my feelings. And I wasn't at a place where I trusted anybody with my feelings. So my mind was telling me I was in danger. I was trying to get out of there. And he was trying to stop me from going. And I completely went into sort of fight mode, which wasn't like a common thing for me, like ever. Like if I was in fight mode, it really felt like he was like, like I was in danger and he was about to hit me and stuff like that. And so I literally busted that door down. And I said, leave me alone. And I ran home. And then on my walk home, it was like a mile or two walk. And on my walk home, I was like, what the hell was that? Like my mind was literally telling me I was in danger. And I was like, and I couldn't understand why. Like, and that was the start of me talking to God about it. And I was like, God, I need to understand why I felt like I was in such danger, why I felt like I was fighting for my life. Like you would have thought he was trying to kill me or something, and he wasn't. I just had a trauma that he wasn't aware of, and I didn't know how to explain it to him. But mentally, I just wasn't in a space to be talking to him about any of it. And I honestly, I didn't. Whenever I went with my abuse, like whenever I got beaten, I would just go off into my room and fall asleep after like crying for so many hours. I never talked to anybody about it. So like this person trying to push me to talk about it, it's like I didn't grow up with a safe space to talk to anyone about it. So it was it felt like I had to revisit a danger in a space that I didn't feel safe and with a person that I didn't necessarily feel safe with. So it was a lot. So like, but it was enough where it was such an explosive reaction that I had to look back and be like, what was that? Like that wasn't normal. That wasn't even me. But healing is teaching your mind you're not there anymore. And when I was walking, like it was the first time God had showed me, look, hey, you went through this. You're not there anymore. And I got to start revealing it. And that was the start of me wanting to heal, right? That was the start of me starting to get curious and starting to ask questions and starting to be open to looking at the past. But it would go on for a couple more years before I didn't start my healing journey until I was in my 20s. But it was the opener that God used. God was very strategic with me. And this is why I go hard for Jesus. But my final point is you have to choose who you become now. At some point, healing becomes a decision, right? Um, Not based on how you feel, but based on who you want to stay, right? I came from an environment where like it was very everyone was very emotionally explosive. Not everyone like a lot of my family had like traumatic stuff happen, and no one really dealt with their stuff. And we grew up like strong people, and everyone just kind of chugged on and didn't really deal with it. And that's kind of a lot of the black experience, right? And so, like, people treat you like you're strong, but in all reality, I'm not strong. I just learned to not let myself feel emotionally while I was going through it. So, after the fact, it's easier to process it, but it also requires me reliving what I tried to avoid for so long. So, like, one of the things I had to learn how to do is analyze the environment I grew up in, right? And how I always kind of felt like I had to be the calm one and things like that. But one of the things I will say, as an example to reel myself back in, um, one of the things that made me want to decide to change, I was working at a dealership. It was my first dealership I'd ever worked at, and I was making decent money. I was making really good money, but I was going through a lot with working around men and being good at what I do. That was becoming a lot. However, that was when God started to encounter me. Like when I say encounters, I had encounters, like literally talking straight up. And we talked about my purpose, and it was a deep conversation. And it was simply this, like you have a purpose, and as you heal, as you commit yourself to healing and growing closer to me, I'm going to make it more apparent to you. And it took a long time, but it made my healing process amazing because the more I healed, the more clear my purpose became. As He promised me at the beginning, as Jesus promised me at the beginning of my process. It was like, you commit to this and I'm going to do that. And it was such a crazy encounter that it was like this wild beginning of change. First thing I did was get baptized. And then I started to naturally separate from friends that were breadcrumbing me and not giving me much. I held on to some because, again, like once you decide to heal, it's not like you're radically healed in the moment. I know people like to think you just touch on someone's forehead, they fall out, and then you're never the same. It's not like that. You can heal to a certain degree, but you still have to walk out your healing, which takes time. Give yourself time to heal. I know people do this thing, especially in apostle settings and stuff like that, apostolic settings and stuff like that. Everybody just acts like it's supposed to be automatic, and it's not. It really isn't. Like there's a start that happens, an initial start, but healing is a journey, especially when you've been through some trauma. It's a journey. It's a process. It's something that is heavily done with God. I'm not saying you can do therapy, um, and therapy can go along with it. But of course, qualify your people and things like that. I know I couldn't afford that much therapy in my process. The closest to therapy I got is God got me in this school where they were doing a lot of therapy setting type. It was like a group therapy type class, and it was like that for a while. And it was always with the right people. Sometimes I had funding for it. So God was literally paying for my healing. And God was like funding it because I was making the decision, the hard decision, that I was going to make a decision that I did not want to be like the environment I grew up in. I didn't want to have kids or a husband that was an extension of what I'd been through. I want to do it different. I don't want to yell. I didn't I feel like I started to love this version of me that doesn't like chaos, that doesn't thrive in it, that doesn't create it. I just want that boring peace, that peace where we ain't gotta argue to get points across. We can accept each other without it having to be this up and down relationship. Like I just didn't want any of those things anymore, and I learned that that was a huge part of growing and healing and making a decision that I'm gonna love me, and that love for me is gonna be an overflow into relationships. And that means that I get to set boundaries on what I'm gonna accept back and not accept. And I'm not going to be a slave to validation from others. Validation can only be fulfilled from God, period. Um, but you don't heal by accident. You heal on purpose. You heal on purpose, literally. Like, and that was literally the message God gave me a long time ago. Was healing was tied to purpose. The more I healed, the more purpose would become clear. And it's clear more than it ever has been. But to close, you are not stuck as who you were past. Your past shaped you, yes. But God didn't bring you this far to leave you in survival mode, of course. But He didn't bring you this far to leave you in survival mode. You can unlearn it. You can rebuild it. And you can become someone who is whole, not just someone who endured. You deserve so much more. And I'm proud of you for taking this step. Follow for healing. Like and subscribe. Thank you for listening again. Appreciate it.